Do you also cry from hunger? A question so simple, yet it pierced the heart of a millionaire already drowning in grief. What happens when the richest man in the city meets the poorest beggar, and both discover they share the same kind of pain? This was not just a chance encounter. It was the beginning of a story that would touch every soul who heard it. The city awoke with its usual noise, the honking of cars, the chatter of vendors, the rush of footsteps filling the pavements. To everyone else, it was just another morning. But for one man, today carried a weight heavier than any morning he had ever known. The millionaire stepped out of his gleaming black car, its polished surface reflecting the sun. His suit was perfectly tailored, his shoes spotless, and yet his face told another story. There were shadows beneath his eyes, the kind of darkness that no wealth could erase. His lips were pressed tightly, as though holding back words, or perhaps holding back grief. Today was not a day of celebration, not a day of business success, not a day of power. It was the day he mourned his only son, the boy who once ran into his arms with laughter, the boy who had carried his name with pride, the boy who had been his greatest treasure, was gone. As he walked slowly down the crowded street, his wealth seemed meaningless. People turned to look at him with admiration, some even with envy. They saw the luxury, the elegance, the strength. But no one saw the storm raging inside his chest. No one knew that his heart was hollow, like a grand mansion emptied of its joy. Every step he took felt heavier than the last. The world bustled around him, blind to his silence. The sound of his expensive shoes striking the pavement echoed like a lonely drumbeat, reminding him with each step of the emptiness he carried. For the first time in years, he felt small, not because of the crowd, not because of the street, but because grief had stripped away everything he thought mattered. And though his pockets were full, his soul was empty. In that busy street, surrounded by life, he felt more alone than ever before. While the millionaire walked in silence, the world around him seemed a blur. Yet, at the edge of that same bustling street, life was painted in a very different shade. In the shadow of a crumbling wall sat a black beggar, his body hunched forward, his eyes tired and sunken. His hands, roughened by years of hardship, trembled as he held out a small dented bowl. His clothes hung loosely, torn and faded, as though they too carried the scars of time. The crowd streamed past him without pause. Some glanced with pity, others turned their heads away as if his very presence disturbed the rhythm of their lives. For most, he was invisible, a forgotten figure, another silent shadow among the noise of the city. But there was something different about this beggar. His gaze did not beg alone for coins or bread. It carried stories. Stories of nights spent beneath the open sky, of battles fought in silence, of hunger that went beyond the stomach. His eyes were not just tired, they were wounded, yet still burning with a strange, unshakable dignity. He whispered prayers under his breath, not loud enough for others to hear, but enough for his own soul to keep breathing. Hunger gnawed at his body, yet what weighed on him more was the loneliness, the feeling of being unseen, unheard, untouched by kindness. Children laughed and ran past him, carrying bread in their hands. The smell of roasted food from a nearby stall drifted through the air, teasing his empty stomach. But he did not reach out. He simply sat, watching life pass by, as though he had accepted his fate. And it was in this forgotten corner, where the world had abandoned him, that his path would cross with the grieving millionaire. Because sometimes life brings together two broken souls, not by accident, but by design. The millionaire's polished shoes clicked softly against the pavement as he passed the forgotten corner. His mind was still drowning in sorrow, his thoughts chained to the memory of his son. He did not see the crowd. He did not hear the laughter. He only carried the silence of grief. But then, a voice rose, weak, trembling, yet sharp enough to cut through the noise of the street. Do you also cry from hunger? The words did not come from a passerby or a merchant. They came from the beggar, the same man who sat in the corner, with eyes that had seen too much of life's cruelty. His tone was not mocking, nor was it desperate. It was honest, raw, and filled with a pain that demanded to be heard. The millionaire froze. For a brief second, the entire street seemed to stop with him. His eyes darted toward the beggar. He had been asked many questions in his life, about wealth, about business, about power, but never this. Hunger? No. He had never known the ache of an empty stomach. He had never begged for bread, never gone to sleep with nothing to eat. Yet the question pierced his heart because in that moment, he realized he did know another kind of hunger. A hunger that gnawed at the soul, the hunger of a father's love lost forever. The crowd moved on, uninterested. But between the millionaire and the beggar, time seemed to stand still. Their eyes met, one filled with grief, the other with desperation. And in that silent exchange, two different worlds collided. The millionaire wanted to speak, but his lips refused. His throat tightened, his chest felt heavy. He could not answer. For how does one explain a hunger that food cannot fill? And in that silence, something powerful began to stir. Because sometimes the simplest question can break open the deepest wounds. The beggar's question echoed in the millionaire's mind like a bell that refused to stop ringing. Do you also cry from hunger? The words were simple, yet they unlocked a door he had kept tightly closed. He stood still, staring at the beggar, his face pale and unreadable. People brushed past him, rushing to their destinations, but he did not move. His hands clenched at his sides, his chest rising and falling with a heavy rhythm. No, he had never cried from the hunger of an empty stomach. His wealth had always shielded him from such suffering. But what the beggar could not see was the emptiness that gnawed at his heart. The millionaire had cried from another kind of hunger, a hunger for his son's laughter, for the warmth of his presence, for the life that had been taken too soon. Behind the sharp suit and polished shoes lived a man broken by grief. His wealth could buy him anything except the one thing he longed for most, to hear his son's voice again. The beggar's words felt like an arrow striking the very wound he had tried to hide from the world. His lips trembled, but no reply escaped. His silence was louder than any answer. And in that silence, the millionaire realized something. Hunger wears many faces. Some hunger for bread, others hunger for love, for comfort, for the return of what they have lost forever. The beggar had unknowingly spoken to his deepest wound. The beggar's bowl trembled in his hands as he slowly lifted his head. His voice was faint, but it carried a weight that made the air around them grow still. Hunger, he whispered, is not always of the stomach. Sometimes it is of the heart. The millionaire's eyes narrowed, his chest tightening as he listened. He had expected a plea for money, perhaps a cry for bread. But what he heard instead was something far deeper. I have begged for food, the beggar continued. I have gone nights without a piece of bread, days without a drop of water. My body aches from it, yes. But what hurts more is another kind of hunger. The hunger of being invisible. The hunger of being forgotten. His gaze shifted to the passing crowd who walked by without noticing him. They see only rags. They see only weakness. But they do not see me. I was once a worker, a man with dreams, a man with a family. Life stripped it all away, and now I am only a shadow to them. The millionaire felt his breath catch. Each word seemed to echo inside his own chest. He too was hungry, not for bread, but for the laughter of his son, for the love he could no longer hold. The beggar looked up, his tired eyes locking with the millionaire's. Do you know what it means to live with that emptiness? To wake each day, not hungry for food, but for someone to simply see you as human? The millionaire swallowed hard. In that moment, he understood. Pain was a language that wealth and poverty both could speak, and the beggar's truth had spoken directly to his heart. The millionaire stood still, unable to look away from the beggar's weary face. The man's words echoed in his chest like thunder, stirring wounds he had buried beneath layers of wealth and silence. For the first time, he saw himself in another's suffering. The beggar's hunger was for dignity, for recognition, for a place in a world that overlooked him. In his own hunger, the millionaire realized, was no different. His loss had carved a hollow space within him that no amount of luxury could ever fill. His eyes blurred with tears as memories rushed back. He saw his son's smile, his laughter that once filled the mansion with light, the playful footsteps that ran across marble floors. And then, silence. The silence that had swallowed his world whole when his son was taken away. He pressed a hand against his chest as though trying to hold his heart together. The crowd still walked past, unaware that in the middle of the street, two broken men were quietly reflecting each other's pain. The beggar lowered his gaze again, but the millionaire did something no one expected. He stepped closer, his shadow falling across the frail figure. For years, he had lived above others, protected by glass walls of pride and status. Yet now he felt them shatter. In that moment, they were not millionaire and beggar. They were simply two fathers, two souls marked by emptiness, bound together by grief the world could not see. And for the first time, the millionaire understood. True suffering has no measure of wealth or poverty. It simply lives where love has been lost. The air between them grew heavy, as though the noise of the bustling street had faded into silence. The millionaire stood over the beggar, his eyes wet, his breathing uneven. All his life, people had looked at him with admiration or envy. But now, for the first time, someone had unknowingly looked straight into his soul and touched the emptiness within it. The beggar shifted uncomfortably, lowering his bowl, ashamed of his words. Perhaps he had spoken too boldly, he thought. Perhaps he had offended the rich man who could easily walk away without a second glance. But before he could apologize, he noticed something that startled him. The millionaire's trembling hands, the tears beginning to spill down his face. The beggar's eyes widened. He had seen many wealthy men in his lifetime, but never had he seen one cry so openly in the middle of a crowded street. The millionaire slowly knelt down, lowering himself to the beggar's level. His expensive suit brushed the dusty pavement, yet he did not care. For once, appearances did not matter. He looked into the beggar's tired eyes and spoke softly, his voice breaking. "You asked if I cry from hunger," he whispered. "No, I have never hungered for food, but I cry every night from another hunger, the hunger of losing my son. My wealth cannot bring him back. My power cannot heal this emptiness. And in that, I am as hungry as you are." The beggar's lips parted, his breath catching. He had expected rejection, perhaps even anger. But what he found instead was a confession, one that broke the barrier between them. In that moment, two worlds collided. One man, clothed in wealth yet stripped of joy. Another clothed in rags yet carrying the wisdom of suffering. Both hungry in different ways, both wounded by life in ways that no one else could understand. The millionaire reached into his pocket, but not for money. Instead, he pulled out a small photograph, his son's smiling face captured forever in a frozen moment of joy. His hands shook as he held it out. "This is my boy," he said. "He was my life and my loss." The beggar stared at the photograph, his eyes softening. Slowly, he placed his own trembling hand over his chest. "I too lost a child once," he admitted, his voice breaking. "And since then, the streets have been my home. We are not so different, you and I." Tears spilled freely down the millionaire's cheeks. Without hesitation, he placed a hand on the beggar's shoulder. No money exchanged, no promises spoken, just the quiet comfort of two grieving fathers who for the first time in years did not feel completely alone. Around them, the city moved on, unaware of the silent bond that had just been formed. But in that forgotten corner, two souls, one wealthy, one poor, found a truth greater than riches or bread. Pain, when shared, loses some of its weight. And sometimes the deepest connection is born not from wealth or status, but from tears that speak the same language.